I grew up in a small town in northwest Ohio where the air in July tasted like corn dust and hot rubber, and Pop sweated in glass bottles behind the garage fridge. At 12, my world was simple math. Pour as much Crispix into a bowl as you could before your brothers came downstairs, then ride your bike until the street lights turned orange and the mosquitoes found you. The one subtraction in that equation was the Daughters of America home, the DOA, a brick hulk at the end of a 300-yard drive choked with sumac and wild grape. If I had to cut through on my way to the river, I did it fast, head down, every gear clacking like teeth. My dad once bid on scrap there, old radiators, he said, but backed out last minute. Bad luck, he told my mom over meatloaf, not looking at either of us. When I asked what that meant, he rubbed the knuckle scar on his thumb and changed the subject. After that, the place lived in my dreams. In them, the upstairs curtain in the east window never sat in the same place twice. Sometimes it hung straight. Sometimes it pursed like lips. Sometimes it bulged like something behind it was breathing. That day started with fishing plans I didn't care about. Carp, boots, it didn't matter. It was a reason to be gone before my brothers woke. I oiled the chain, wolfed cereal, and shot through the gate. The DOA's cast iron arch threw a shadow over the driveway like a noose. Crows hopped the field fence, pecking at something I couldn't see through the ragweed. I stood on the pedals and pumped, the whole time sure someone was pacing me from the blind side of the building. Fishing was boring. River was muddy. My friend and I gave up after a few hours and rolled back to my place. We stashed the poles, grabbed a couple Cokes, and headed to the park with a beat-up basketball wedged in my bike's frame. He peeled off after a few games. I stayed. That's when Mike drifted over. I knew him only by his slow-set shot, and the way it thudded off the backboard like he owed it money. 17 or so. Sandy hair to his shoulders. Tall, all elbows. There was always something off about how too long sleeves sat on him, like he'd borrowed his body from someone else. Up close, I noticed a habit. Right before he talked, he sucked air through his nose, a tiny sniff laugh, and looked at your shoulder instead of your face. "Want a ride?" he asked, sniff laugh. "Got a cool spot." I didn't have anything else. We coasted to the river where the road washed out into a cobbled ford, and he showed me the trick of hopping to a little island. "Told you," he said, sniff laugh. "Cool." Then we rode a few blocks to a porch with peeling paint, a man in his 40s, and a porch swing that moved without anyone in it until it didn't. Bill stood and the swing settled like a breath finishing. He was 6 feet and change, black hair going gray like frost on the sides. Stubble. His hands were rough, and when he gripped the bike handle to move it aside, his thumbnail rasped the rubber. I still hear that sound, a dry file on soft material. "Who's the kid?" he asked. "Ball at the park," Mike said. Sniff laugh. Bill smiled at me like it hurt. "Grab yourself some candy down at the store," he said, and then to me, "You like Pop?" The way he said Pop told me he was from around here, but something in his eyes said he didn't belong anywhere. They bought me a candy bar and a Coke. I sat on the porch while they went inside, speaking too soft to catch. 3 voices. One I didn't know. The screen door breathed in and out. When they came back, Bill clapped his hands once. "One last ride," he said. "I want to show you a place." I already knew. We didn't take the straight way, so it took a minute for the landmarks to line up, for the back of my neck to feel the lanes shade like palms pressed there. We threaded the neighborhood, weaved past the river, and climbed the slight rise that ended at the DOA's iron arch Bill led. Mike slid behind me. We coasted up the drive, weeds slapping our shins, a chain link rattle traveling somewhere through the building's belly like plumbing talking to itself. The front steps held their heat. Bill told me he'd always wanted to go inside. "Buildings got stories," he said, thumbnail rasp rasp. "They whisper to you if you listen." He pushed the main door. Locked. He tried the French door to the left, wouldn't go. He tried the right. The latch coughed and gave. Cool air climbed out, old wood and hospital soap. Somewhere metal dragged. That chain again, a lazy serpent adjusting itself in the hall. "Come on," Bill said, looking back over his shoulder. Mike smiled with his mouth and sniffed like he was laughing at a joke only he'd heard. I shook my head. I didn't move. I set my bike down right at the foot of the steps, basketball still jammed in the frame. The crows in the field had shifted. They perched on the fence now, all facing us. I remember being angry at how slow everything seemed. How the curtain in the east window moved on no wind. "What, you scared?" Mike said. Sniff laugh. "I gotta go," I said. Bill came down the steps in 2 strides and clamped my right arm above the elbow. His hands were strong in the way of men who build things or break them. I twisted, and Mike took my other arm. They pulled, smiling, like if they could get me up 2 steps the rest of me would follow. The door hung open, exhaling that soap stink, and the chain spoke again, closer. Sometimes you pull something loose in yourself on purpose. I leaned back hard, put all my weight into Bill's grip, then popped up both feet and kicked straight at Mike's face. I felt cartilage give under my sneakers, and he shrieked, hands to his nose, blood running through his fingers. I drove my heel down onto Bill's instep. He grunted, adjusted to lift me. I threw my head back. The back of my skull caught his jaw with a crack that I felt in my teeth. His grip loosened enough for me to rip my left arm free. My right came a second later. I turned and kicked him in the groin as hard as I could. He folded to one knee, eyes emptying. Mike was up again, hunched, reaching. I shoved him. He stumbled. I grabbed my bike. He staggered toward me, and I remembered the basketball. I yanked it free and threw it as hard as my 12-year-old body knew how. It smacked his already bloodied hand and made a sound that will always be funny to someone else and sick to me. I didn't look back. I pedaled the 1,000 yards home like it was a mile of ice, and the whole winter was behind me. The garage door was open. My dad hunched over the table saw, blade singing. He looked up enough to say, "Hey, bud," then back to the line of the cut. My lungs were full of bees. I watched the open rectangle of the garage until my eyes hurt. No bikes. No men. The chain sound in my head finally quieted. I didn't tell anyone. Shame and not understanding make a glue that kids choke on. The next day I rode the long way to the park. Weeks layered on. Years. Senior year, I drew the DOA for a hometown history paper. The condos were going up by then. Par, 3 flags popped in the wind where the crows had stood. I rolled microfilm, printed clippings, worked backward. Then there it was, an article 6 months after my day on those steps. 3 men arrested for squatting at the DOA. Names I knew: Bill. Mike. A third I didn't, maybe the hush voice from behind the screen. They'd kidnapped a mentally handicapped boy. The paper ran their mugshots in a neat row. In the background of Bill's, through a station window, a smudgy reflection caught a shape in a high window, east side. Out on County Road 412 the dark comes on in layers. First the sun slides off the hay bales, then the fence posts turn to teeth, and finally the road narrows until it's just you and the dust trailing your bumper like a ghost that can't keep up. I was 19, bone-tired from work and class, a to-go Dr. Pepper sweating circles on my thigh, and the dash clock said 11:15 when I passed him. A string bean in a yellow shirt, bright as a warning sign, waving like we were kin. He had that smile people in town call friendly, until they learn the second meaning. I lifted my fingers off the wheel. Habit, manners. And then something in me said nope, and I pressed a little harder on the gas. Home was a ranch style squatting in a sea of Bermuda grass. Half a mile one way a loony farmer, mile the other the old Miller place that everybody called the crack house. The only neighbors were cicadas and the whisper of highway 4 fields over. I pulled into the drive, nose of my little car pointed toward the porch. The motion light above the steps clicked, one dry little tick, before it blinked to life. I killed the engine and listened, waiting to hear his footsteps pass, waiting for the light to die. It didn't. It hung on, humming like it knew more than me. I went inside fast and quiet, slid the chain, thumbed the deadbolt. "Make sure them windows are set," Daddy always said, and I could hear his voice as I checked the kitchen latch, the laundry room lock, the little bathroom window that stuck in the summer. The house smelled like pine sol, and the bacon Mama cooked before her shift. I sat on the couch, just tall enough to see the cut of the driveway through the front window. He didn't pass. Instead, Yellow drifted up the gravel with another shape beside him, both of them doing that arrogant stroll like the land under their feet belonged to them. They went straight to my car and started testing handles, driver side, passenger, back, like a dance they'd rehearsed. The yellow shirt made a soft static sound when his sleeve brushed the glass. It raised goosebumps on my arms. I realized my phone was still in the cup holder and felt the stupid hit the back of my throat. Yellow broke off and came to the door. That porch light ticked again, a bug caught in a clock, and his face popped into brightness. Too wide smile, eyes not matching it. He put his palm flat on the glass like I'd invited him. "Ma'am," he said, syrupy. "You dropped your wallet." My body moved without me. I slipped down the hall like a ghost sent on an errand. "Mama," I whispered at her door. "There's folks at the house." She came up out of sleep like she'd only been pretending. Barefoot, robe tied, her hair in a no-nonsense braid, She crossed the hallway and stood behind the deadbolt with her hand on it like she was blessing it. "We good for the night?" she called through the wood, voice sweet tea calm. "You go on now." He tried the knob. Not rattled, tested. A careful, slow turn that made the screws whisper in their seats. "Call 911, Mama said, not looking at me. "I'll fetch the Ruger." Her hands trembled once, a small betrayal, when she opened the drawer in her nightstand. Then they stilled, stone sure, when she chambered around. The phone shook against my ear as I told the dispatcher our address, and that 2 men were at our door. The woman asked me if they were trying to get in. "They're working on it," I said, and hated the way my voice sounded. Yellow knocked, gentle as Sunday school. "Ma'am," he said, "I ain't a bad guy, just so you know." The porch light buzzed. The sensor ticked again. The other man kept his place by my car, head turned toward the house, and then he stopped being there. He wasn't at the door either. He'd gone missing. Mama's mouth went thin. "Check the kitchen window," she said without moving her eyes. I crept to the bathroom first, that tricky little window with the warped glass. Through it, the backyard lay in blue, the fence a black line. A third man stood by the crepe myrtle, head cocked, like he could hear the house breathing. He didn't look at the window. He looked at the place where we kept the spare key under a frog statue, and smiled as if somebody had told him a secret. "Mama," I said, breath like a paper bag. "There's one in the back." She raised her voice so the night could hear it. "Try that handle again. I'll open this door and shoot you dead." For a second nobody moved. The house held its breath, the cicadas went quiet, and even the highway hush faded like someone turned the knob down. Then Yellow's smile peeled off his face. He took 2 steps backward without turning. The man by the car flinched. The backyard shape flitted through shadows, heading south, and the 3 of them shook gravel as they ran, a zipper sound that made my teeth hurt. Sirens were small diamonds in the distance at first, and then they grew teeth. Sheriff rolled up in a wash of blue and white, and more deputies after him. They swept the yard, shined lights along the fence line, and then peeled off toward the Miller place. A while later they came back with 5 men lined up, hands cuffed, heads down. Yellow was third in the row. One of them wore a high school leather jacket, our high school's colors, the patch my ex had sweated through 2 seasons in. He didn't look at me, but I felt him like static. The sheriff took statements, his pen scratching like a cricket. Mama's voice didn't wobble once. The Ruger lay on the entry table, muzzle pointed neatly at the umbrella stand, like manners mattered. He said we did right. He said the Miller place used to be a preacher's nephew's until the bank took it, and it went wrong fast after. He said he'd have patrols pass by a few extra nights. He told Mama she had grit. He told me to get some sleep. The light finally clicked off, one last tick to let the night know it could resume. The house settled, beams creaking, as if bones shifted to get comfortable again. I lay awake listening for the sensor to tick and the dog we didn't have to bark, and somewhere between 3 and 4 I slept a slice. Sun makes everything look staged. You tell yourself you were dramatic. Then you step outside and see the tire marks, a near arc curving up the driveway like a scythe laid against our front steps. Black rubber etched into gravel and limestone dust. On the door's glass, a cloudy palm print, big as a dinner plate and greasy, right where Yellow had laid his hand. I Windexed it until the blue ran down the paint. It didn't fade. By noon it looked the same. Next day, same. A week later, still there, the shape of need and nerve burned into the pain like a watermark you have to live through to see. We moved 2 years after that, traded the ranch road for a nicer zip code with sidewalks and mailboxes you could decorate for Christmas. I still lock the doors in a loop, front, kitchen, hall, twice, then touch the deadbolt a 3rd time for Daddy's sake. Our new dog, Hank, sleeps by the back fence. Every Tuesday at 11:15, don't ask me why Tuesday, but it always is, he stands up from dead sleep, noses the air, and growls at nothing I can see. The motion light ticks, a shy little sound, and comes on as if a yellow shirt has brushed it, humming against the glass. Spanish moss hung off the live oaks like old gossip, and the heat pressed its palm on Bill's food center, so steady you could have sworn the front windows bowed. Early 70s low country, before the bridge brought weekenders through, when folks still parked their boats behind the Piggly and came in barefoot, leaving a salt line on the linoleum. My mama ran the register under a brass bell that turned every hey now into a hymn. She counted change in 3s, tap, 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 before she set it in a palm. Keeps the bat off, she'd say, smiling without showing teeth. They came in on a Wednesday, because Wednesday is when rot sets in the aisles if it's going to, the lettuce sighing, the bread sweating, the milk deciding whether it will behave. The older one was smooth as cane syrup poured slow, hair parted just so, smile like a pocket knife you could barely see until it was out. The younger wasn't much, but a shadow stuck to his shoulder. He didn't blink enough. If he'd been a gator, he'd have looked like a log. Afternoon, Mama told them, smoothing her apron. Need help finding anything? No, sweetie, the older one purred, palm flat on the counter like he was feeling for a heartbeat. We'll let you know when we find what we need. His watch ticked, but wrong, like it wasn't keeping time so much as eating it. Tick between the ticks. They took a basket and drifted. Picked up nothing. Put their hands on everything. He misnamed every aisle like he was testing where she was from. Where y'all keep the grits? He asked in front of the cornmeal. And them hushpuppi beans? He said pimento, as if it had an extra syllable, and called boiled peanuts hot nuts, with a wink so sticky Mama had to wipe the register glass after. They paid for a paper and a moon pie with a crisp 10. Mama counted back the change, 3/4, a dime, a nickel, tap, 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 and their eyes followed her fingers like cats after dragonflies. The bell over the door sighed when they left. Wind came in with them, but didn't go out. They were back the next day, and the next, always when the store was fullest or emptiest, never the comfortable middle when the floorboards creaked just right and Miss Tilda from the diner would come in for sweet cream and stories. On Saturday, when the shrimp boats tapped masts like glasses on the river, the older man came to the counter with purpose. We're fixin' to take a little campin' trip, he said, smile touching down and taking off. Need a rope strong as sin and some duct tape for my shootin' grip. Gun'll blister a man's hand if you don't wrap it. Ain't that right, buddy? The younger one finally showed teeth. Not a smile, just inventory. Mama felt her hackles come up like the yard cat's. She asked how much rope. Just a bit, he said, holding his fingers this far apart and then farther. 100 feet might do it, case we find a holler to cross. There aren't hollers where marsh eats land, where the river is a mouth and a hand at once. But Mama didn't bother to correct him. She sold him cotton rope because she kept the nylon behind the counter for trot lines. The duct tape she slid across with the same fingers she'd used to bless a child. He peeled out in a dull sedan that hunched like it was hiding. As the bell settled, Mama whispered the plate 3 times and then again, tap, 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 and wrote it on the paper bag under her register with a golf pencil. She studied her reflection in the slider glass until the freckles on her nose were just dots of ink she could move if she wanted. Monday came flat and hard. A cashier over at Darrell's down the road didn't make it home. Folks layered Lord atop, why atop, not her, until the church fans shook on their sticks. When the deputies found her by the river, the paper said bound and assaulted and stabbed because there are only so many words that will touch certain things without burning. Mama went pale as fish belly. She told Grandpa she had to go, and Bill grumbled about trouble, but he fetched his hat. The detective's office smelled like canned coffee and failure. Mama gave them the plate number without looking at her paper bag. She explained the rope, the tape, the misnamed hush puppies. He called boiled peanuts hot nuts, she said, and one of the men behind the desk laughed before he saw her eyes and quit. She told them about the watch. Ticked wrong, she said, tapping 3 times on the arm of the chair to get her pulse in order. Like it was behind itself. What did you say to them? The detective asked. The same thing I say to everybody, Mama said. Hey now, y'all need help finding anything? Her voice rolled it out the way she always did at Bill's, the way it could make a person feel known for a second longer than they deserved. Time crawled like a crab sideways. People started locking doors they'd always left open for breeze and neighbor. The bell at Bill's got heavier. It took more elbow to make it sing. Mama started sorting the till by 3s as if the numbers themselves might build a fence. 3 dimes, 3 nickels, 3 pennies, stacked like little soldiers. Every time the register drawer rattled, she flinched like a rope had slipped a gloved hand somewhere behind her. A strip of tape floated back to the store 3 days later, snagged on a pallet at the loading dock like the river was returning something it didn't want. Sun had baked it silver white. When Grandpa peeled it off, it left a dull scar on the wood that didn't sand out. He set the tape in the trash, and 5 minutes later Mama pulled it back out with tongs, folded it into thirds, and slid it into an evidence bag the deputy had left on the desk by mistake. Some things need to be witnessed proper, she said. They caught the men down in Beaufort, like bad pennies showing up under the same porch step. At the trial, the older one watched the female bailiff like he'd already measured her wrists. The younger man never spoke until the last day, when the jury'd been out so long the wood benches held the shape of everybody's worrying. He stood, glanced at Mama in the gallery, and said, in her cadence so exact it laid cold against her skin, "Hey now. Y'all need help findin' anything?" He wore a cheap suit that made his shoulders look wrong, and his mouth moved like he was practicing how to fit into her life. Cuffs clicked. The judge looked tired in his bones. On the courthouse steps someone said the deputies told Mama the men had been casing bills, that her bell in her hands and her threes had been on their list. "Might have been you," the detective said, not unkind. Mama nodded, counted 3 cracks in the concrete, 3 clouds over the live oak, 3 sharp breaths. Then she went home and told Bill she wouldn't close alone anymore. He didn't argue. He moved the stool from the back to the front, and the stool watched the door after that. Years stacked. The bridge came, and the weekenders. The bell rusted a little and still sang. Mama's threes never changed. Sometimes late, when the floorboards shouted and the moon pressed itself to the glass like a big pearl, she'd catch herself listening for the watch, that wrong, backward tick, somewhere between the canned tomatoes and the flour. If she heard it, she'd press her palm to the counter, tap, 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 and say to the empty aisle, "Hey now. Y'all need help findin' anything?" And in the hummed silence after, you could swear the river answered, carrying a strip of something silver back toward town. In our neighborhood, even the grass had rules. It had to stay 1 regulation inch, edged laser straight along the sidewalks, so the HOA wouldn't hatch a nasty gram. Every cul-de-sac had the same 3 crepe myrtles. Every mailbox wore the same black paint that chipped in the same places, like we all bought our lives at the same store. Once a year, though we got rowdy, rocked the park. That's when the dads in golf polos took off their caps and the garage band uncoiled from its hibernation and aimed for Aerosmith, missed, and hit something like Skinner if you squinted. The toddler train circled the gazebo. The lifeguards let the pool stay open late. The cones marked off the stage, which was really just grass with wires like tripwires. I was 21 and fixin' to feel something besides the HOA's hand on my shoulder. I poured vodka into my Coke bottle till it went from fizz to bite and walked the block and a half to the park. Warm air, cicadas, a sky stretched out flat as a promise. I took the closest bench to the cones, front row for dads rocking out, reckless and loud in their hearts, if not in their hands. A guy sat at the far end of the slat, bony face, haircut too close, age somewhere in the 30s but trying to be ageless. I clocked him like you clock the weather. Might be nothing, might be something, keep an eye on it. "Howdy," he said, leaning in like my gravity pulled him. "How y'all doing tonight?" "Good," I said without looking up, thumbs working a dead-end loop on my phone. Vodka made my ribs lighter. The music tried to be sweet emotion. The air tried to be forgiving. "You from around here?" he asked. 2 questions in back to back like he'd practiced. "From around here?" "Yeah." I walked. "I shouldn't," he answered. "Habit did." "Walked," he echoed, and smiled like he liked the taste of the word. "You got a number I can text?" "Don't reckon." I scooted a 1/4 inch away. He scooted a 1/2 inch closer, a math I didn't appreciate. He kept talking, questions in pairs, each pair echoing my last syllable. "You here with friends?" "Friends. You like this band?" "Band." Each time I tried to starve the conversation, he fed it. He didn't ask my name. He didn't offer his. He smelled like dryer sheets and old pennies. His sneakers were wrong, too, red clay ground into the tread. "We don't get that dirt here. Not in this development." I stood, stretched, played casual. "I'm gonna walk around a sec." "Loud here." "Loud here," he echoed, and I went behind the playground's plastic cliffs where you can disappear even at 21 if you hunch and pretend to be a bored babysitter. I texted my college group chat. "Got a creeper tips?" Everyone said leave now. But if he watched me go and followed, he'd map my life to the cul-de-sac. I texted my high school friend, "Ratch, you home? Can you come scoop me?" She said, "Yeah, gimme 20, I'm on my way." Which in Texas time means she was already driving before I hit send. When I looped around to the swings, he was there, sitting like we'd planned it. The band behind us wrestled Dream On to the mat. He tilted his head, little bird jerk. "Want me to walk you home?" he asked. "Walk you home?" The suggestion came gentle the first time, then gathered thunderhead insistence. "I'm headed that way anyhow. Over by Willow Mill Pool." He said the pool's name like he was remembering it from a map, casual as lint, but you don't accidentally know the side pool's name unless you live here. Or you studied. "I'm good," I said. "Gonna hang for a song." A song, he repeated, like maybe the word would turn into a promise if he said it with me. Which way you live? I pointed east, the exact wrong direction. He took 3 steps that way like a dog on a leash. Come on, he said. Come on. His voice never rose, but the center of it got heavy. A pair of kids ran between us, sticky with snow cones. A mom laughed. The stroller wheels creaked. In the bright ring of the park light, everything looked safe and choreographed. Outside it, the dark-head room. Headlights pulled up along the curb. White Corolla. Ratch. I stood so fast my Coke bottle almost tipped. That's my friend, I said. That's her. I waved both arms. He palmed my shoulder, too familiar, too slow, like he'd already placed me on a shelf in a house I couldn't see. You promised me your number, he said. I hadn't. He said it like a prayer. Sure. I lied because fear is polite when it needs to be. I rattled off 10 digits not mine. He dialed right there, eyes on my hand like he was waiting to hear my purse sing. Didn't your phone die? Ratch blurted, too loud, bless her. I nodded big like we were doing community theater. Right. Dead. I'll text you later, I told him, and we peeled off toward the Corolla. He didn't chase. He watched the taillights, not the plate, as if he liked the idea of me more than the coordinates. Take the long way, I said, breath short. Opposite of my house. Loop around the big pool, then out to Preston and back. We did, quiet, both staring into the black between streetlights like it might stare back. When she finally dropped me off 2 neighborhoods over, I cut through back fences and patios till I felt untraceable, my shadow trying to keep up. The next morning I remembered things that didn't fit right. How he never asked my name. How he never told me his. How he kept repeating my last words like he was stitching himself to my sentences. How he knew the pool. How his shoes had traveled over dirt we don't have. How the music was loud enough to drown me if I'd yelled. He texted 2 days later from a different number. Hey, your friend's bumper sticker is funny. The sticker said I break for queso. I hadn't given him anything true, not my number, not my name, not my direction. But he had my friend pinned to a joke. I blocked the number. He texted again a week later from another, this time just walked. I told myself he'd get bored. Predators love easy. I made my house harder. I started saying reckon and fixin' to louder, like the place might claim me strong enough to keep me. I kept my keys between my fingers the way every girl learns, metal teeth that feel brave until you imagine them in use. A year spun. Same cones, same dads, same songs not quite landing. I didn't plan on going to rock the park again, but habit is superstition wearing jeans, and I guess I wanted to prove the world couldn't run me out of my own bench. I went early sober, sunglasses like a shield. The bench slat had a new scar, numbers carved with a pocket knife. My number. Except not. 1 digit off. Close enough to make my heart do the wrong math. Close enough that if you were a stranger, you might call and think you'd reached me. Close enough that if you were him, you'd laugh while the knife tip worried the wood. The band struck up Don't Stop Believin', and the HOA mom with the clipboard nodded, and the lifeguard twirled a whistle, and the sky laid down on us like a big warm dog. It looked like safety from 10 feet up. From inside my bones it sounded like an engine idling in the dark. Shenandoah doesn't go quiet so much as it changes keys. In daylight, the ridges hum with cicadas, and the guy wires on the tower sing a note you can feel in your teeth. After sundown, barred owls trade questions, and the pines make a soft shush like a librarian begging the mountains to behave. When I was 21, an Army reservist with 1 deployment and too much swagger, I worked a fire tower a few miles off Skyline Drive. 1 week on, 1 week off. A cot, a hot plate, a crate of Franks and beans, a lantern that smelled like old pennies, and a rifle propped in the corner since a grizzly had taken a spotter out west. The ranger who issued it wouldn't meet my eyes when he said out west, like the world had directions where bad things filed their paperwork. The tower stairs groaned in a count of 13 if you came up steady. I'd count without meaning to 1, 2, 3, and if I ever hit 12 and couldn't find 13, my stomach would drop like I'd miscounted myself. The map on the wall had a circle penciled in northeast of the tower, a patch where lightning split a stand the year I was born, and the trees never took leaf right again. Even in June, that acre looked like February had hands. I found the bear trap on a Tuesday afternoon near that circle, its steel jaw disguised under oak leaves like a mouth biding time. I tripped it with a forked stick, and the metal clapped shut on air, so hard it rang my forearms. I told Ben on the radio I'd swing it by the station in my Jeep when I went for groceries. Ben ran the next tower over, older by decades, a man built like a ridge line, broad, steady shoulders and the patience to watch weather from a chair. He'd laugh and call me kid even when I bristled. The static made him sound far and close at once. Copy that, kid. At dusk the valley laid itself down, light thinning until everything was made of edges. I heated beans, wrote a letter to my fiancée, and listened to the wires. The tower felt tall enough to get me an answer if I asked the right question. I heard the truck before I saw it, a growl dragging rocks, a timing belt that skipped a beat every few seconds like the motor had arrhythmia. No plates. For men climbed out with the easy balance of people who carried rifles more often than groceries. Traps clanked in the truck bed. They smelled like wet leather and old smoke. The one in front had a scar like a dogleg above his eyebrow, bent and crooked. Folks at the gas station had a ghost name for a crew that ran snares through the hollers and sold meat in the dark. The Dogleg Boys. I'd laughed at that name once, because I was 21 and stupid about what names could hold. Evening. I called down, because there's a way you're supposed to talk in the woods, like everyone belongs to the same quiet. I made it 2 steps off the last landing with the lantern, before somebody's hand hit my chest so hard the light flew. It cracked on a rock with the sound of a brittle spine. A boot heel slid my rifle out of reach. Another hand found my elbow the way a butcher finds a joint. The dogleg above his eye made his face look like it had an extra hinge. "Got yourself a nest up there, kid?" he said. I thought I'd signal, or buy time, or turn into the kind of person who does the right brave thing on instinct. Instead I said, "I'm supposed to call this in," and one of them laughed without sound, just a cough of air like a low tire. "Not tonight," another said. He whistled then, a little scrap of nothing, tuneless, a bar that started but didn't know where to go. I didn't hear the forest around us anymore. No crickets. No owl. The wires shut up. The silence rang as loud as the lantern had broken. They walked me off the cleared hill and into the trees. I didn't fight. The quiet felt like a mouth we were walking into. We didn't go far, my knees knew that, but without the night sounds it felt like miles. The lightning patch took us, same as it had taken the trees right to leaf. The air there tastes different, like water that can't remember being rain. They pushed me down. Knees hit rock, hard enough to make the pain skip and catch up late. Rifle bolt racked behind my ear, that slick shotgun chamber music that turns to metal in your spine. I thought about my parents' kitchen in Appomattox, the way my mama sets forks tines up by habit, and the stitched patch in my ruck. Ben had found it under the desk in the tower I took over. A faded Smoky Bear he said he'd mail to my kid someday, when you stop being stupid long enough to have one. I thought about 13 steps and what happens if you miss the last one, because somebody takes it out from under you. If you've ever been in a silence so dense you could hang your weight from it, you know what it sounds like when sirens cut it in half. They didn't bloom so much as explode, red and blue bouncing off trunks like a carnival you can't afford to get into. Voices carried. Tires bit dirt. The poachers cussed like they'd been interrupted mid-prayer. They ran. A hand lifted off my neck, and for a second I kept kneeling, because the air still felt like it could hold me down. Then Ben's voice came through the trees, calm enough to be terrifying. "That was close, kid." Later I learned he'd heard the truck, called me on the radio, and when I didn't answer, me who always clicked twice back like a kid with a light switch, he threw his own rulebook out and drove. He and 2 rangers boxed the Dogleg Boys against a cut bank and pulled them out of the briars by their collars. I stood while one ranger put a blanket on me like shock is weather, and you can get out of it. We sat in the cab of Ben's pickup without talking. He handed me a thermos that tasted like burnt coffee and old Salvation. His dashboard was a little museum, bottle cap from a CCC project, a matchbook from a roadside diner in '78, 2 shotgun shells glued base to make a dumbbell. The smoky patch rode the dash like a passenger. "That was close," he said again finally, and it was the kindest thing anyone has ever said to me, because it kept me from rewriting the night into a story about my own bravery. I left the tower a few months later for a job closer to home. I told myself it was pay in hours. The truth was, when the wind pressed itself to the map room window, I'd hear that little tuneless bar of whistle, and put the radio mic in my hand without meaning to, just to feel the click. The arrest report came through my mailbox by accident. County mix-up, wrong address slapped on the envelope by a clerk who was tired or haunted. One of the men listed his residence as Fire Tower Road, no number, no town. Like he thought that's where he belonged now. Like he knew that once a place keeps your kneeling shape, you live there, in some way, forever.